in Bristol. And then that night, I signed my contract to go pro in Virginia. My arm was broken at the time. I didn't know that. Well, it was broken previous to the fight. I didn't know that. At the time I signed the contract, and a couple of weeks later we were wrestling, and it kind of like popped out of socket. My elbow did, and I was like, man, my arm had been hurting, but I didn't think it was broken. And then sure enough, it was broken. So there was a time gap in that period where I was like, okay, I lost, I'm going to go pro. After the cast came off and I was able to train, I took another fight against Chelsea McCoy, another really good fighter out of Virginia. If you don't know her and you like MMA, if you don't know either of these ladies, you should watch them. So I took a fight against her in Virginia, and I had like probably the worst performance that I'd ever had. And I was like, what is wrong with you? And I figured out what had happened between feeling really good fighting mentally and feeling really bad fighting mentally. And that's really important, like sports psychology-wise for me, because I needed to know how to fix it because I love fighting. It was just a mentality change. So where did that happen? How did it happen? So I did a lot of work mentally after the Chelsea McCoy fight, and I was like, okay, what do I need to do? Why do I have losses? What am I missing? Like, it's not the gym. It's not, it's always you, like you can blame a million things, but when I talk about like the gym, it's not my performance in the gym, or it's not my performance at the strength and conditioning or eating or whatever. It's not me there, it's like, well, it's maybe me mentally. And I pretty much changed my entire life and was like, I'm not going to do this anymore. And I was like, I want to go pro. And I wanted to go pro. I told my manager, I told my coach, I was like, I want to go pro. And the last two fights, I've kind of kept that same mentality. And it's really, for me, it's changed the way I look at fighting. I fought, and people fight for different reasons, but the reason I fought before isn't the reason I fight now. So for me, it's more of a mentality change. I sometimes really downplay how competitive I am because it's not an attractive feature for most people because I really like being better than them. But I'm not sorry about that anymore, and it doesn't bother me to take pride in that because I actually really do love it, and it's something that I like to challenge myself. And a lot of people are like, well, you should be sportsmanlike, and I'm like, I feel like I am sportsmanlike, but I also really want to beat you at the thing. So, I mean, I don't know. I'm just more of a competitive person, and trying to make myself fit into any other box is really hard. So I just kind of went with a better mentality that worked for me and not really the situations around me at the time. So I changed everything, and the last two fights have been really good for me mentally because the first one, my pro debut, was a fucking beast of a fight. She had a bunch of boxing fights. She had one MMA fight before that, and I was excited because I was finally going to get to go pro, after all that time, because you've got to think between the Julia Moore fight, that was 2017, April 2017. I didn't get to go pro until January of 2018. So in my head, I'm like, I'm ready to do this. And she knocked me down a couple of times, but I was like, there's nothing you can do to get me out of here. Unless I'm asleep. You're going to have to put me to sleep because I want this more than you do. And I kind of lost that for a little while, during my amateur career, that absolute, no, I'm fucking going to beat you. I want this more than you. And that's what got me, that's what got me in the first place. That's how well I did in the first place, and I kind of lost it. And I think sometimes if you don't have people around you checking you mentally and just being like, hey, what are you doing? Are you okay? I think people just get stuck in routines and they don't even notice it. And you can get stuck in bad mental routines. You can get stuck in all sorts of different things if people aren't willing to hold you accountable. And, people are like, did you do your meditation this week? You know, like, nobody's going to ask you because there's not people around to keep you accountable. You know, your coach can't keep track of 15 people, 30 people, 50 people. But that's where a lot of fighters don't want to do the mental work because it is taxing. It is hard to look at yourself and be like, okay, well, what did I do wrong in every situation? But instead of looking at it like that, they can look at it like everything that I do is my responsibility, and therefore I can do the best. You know, like it's not up to anyone else how well you do. I'm not saying that I don't need anyone else or that other people don't help me, because I have a tremendous community. I just think it comes down to you, and if you're willing to be responsible for yourself, a lot of times in fights it comes down to who wants it more and who's willing to risk more, and I like those odds, you know.
Yeah, I mean the mental part of the game. I think people don't kind of discredit or whatever. I can name several fighters that if they have off days in terms of mental their mental fitness, as it were, then they're not going to have a really great performance. I think all fighters have that. So yeah, it's kind of it's kind of interesting to kind of get to that competitive edge, and it's something that's like I said, not a lot of people have, and that's something you have to have as a fighter. You have to have that mentality of wanting to push yourself, to be able to to want to accomplish something, and yeah, it's very interesting to kind of get into what a fighter's mindset is going into a cage. If they're seeing it as a competition. I mean, you look at Roxanne Modafferi, and she goes into a fight. She's in it to compete. She wants to win, but you would never expect you would never expect her to be overly. I don't think I would say overly aggressive, but she has that mentality of that. Yeah, I do want to beat you, and I want to have that situation where I want to be a very competitive fight. I respect my opponent very well, but there's always that wanting to win and all that as well. And it's an interesting thing. I mean, we go hours and hours on terms of psychology, but yeah, it's one of those interesting things that people I don't think about very much.
Well, and you say win. I don't necessarily want to win. I just want to beat the other person. So mentally, I guess it's a little bit different for me. I just want to be able to do better than the other person every moment. Like, they could do something amazing. They could do something tremendous. And I need to be able to do something even better the next second. So it's always constantly, like, just beating them in the second. And, like, in the long run, like, instead of, like, I don't really think about, like, oh, I want to win or lose. If I do what I know I can do every second, they'll ask me to come fight again. People will want to watch me fight, because I'm going to have fun doing it, and I'm going to be, my problem is I am overly aggressive, which is fun for people watching, but, learning to try to be patient or learning to try to just work on timing or not be just a brute or, just be more patient. It's really hard. I mean, people don't think about if you're really competitive and super aggressive. I'd love to walk in and be like, "Hi," like, "Nice to meet you." And I'm very nice to people, respectful to people, but I like being in the fight of the nights. I like being in like wars like that, and I know that it's not the best for me. It's just it's something I really enjoy.
Do you like to game plan a lot, or do you like to keep that to your coach? I mean, do you watch videotape of your opponent, or again, is that something that you kind of leave to your coach? Kind of how do you kind of lay out strategy?
I do watch the fights if there's anything to watch. A lot of my first fights, there wasn't anything to watch on anyone. It was still pretty early, so it wasn't like there was a lot to watch on people, But I would watch them if I could, like if there was something to watch, I would watch. My last two opponents, I watched both of their fights. My old coach, she would sometimes game plan, sometimes There was always like a loose plan, but he kind of did everybody differently, which worked really well for everybody because no one's the same. He was really good at kind of customizing the game, like what each fighter needed. So it's like, for me, it was like a good game plan. Sometimes I would be stuck trying to do the thing that I wanted to do in the fight instead of just like move on and do something else. And again, that's me, not him or the game plan or anything else. You know what I'm saying? That's 100% me. I didn't do what I was supposed to do, but it's still things that you realize having a bunch of fights.
Speaking of which, yeah, go ahead.
So I don't really. I watch them, but for me, it's more like you can have a loose plan. Like you can see things that they do, like things that made my last opponent, like made my coach tell me to do something to my last opponent. You know, which made me see it when she was like doing other things, like in other fights. I could see where I could do the move to her. So that was kind of a cool, I guess, like level up for me, was to be able to implement not easily, but see it easily. Like it wasn't easy to do to her, but it was easy to see the openings. Whether I got them or not happened or didn't happen, but it was easier to see like, oh, this is where I will do this move, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Now I was gonna ask. I mean, now in Invicta, right now the only card that ever had this in the United States, Invicta had open scoring, and they had the option of, they showed the score to the coach, and then the coach had the option of telling the fighter, what the score was, and they could do that with that information, anything that they kind of pleased, and all that as well. For you, would you want to know if you were behind? Or do you want your coach to kind of maybe interject some information, or what's kind of your opinion on that?
I would absolutely want to know. I think open scoring is a great idea for many reasons. Yeah.
So because I know there's some fighters that I've heard that said that they wouldn't want to know, but. I think sometimes it gives you that nice little kick in the butt that says, you're behind, let's go.
I didn't think that I was losing the fight that I was talking about in Bristol.
Mm-hmm.
And again, that's no diss to her. She was great. I didn't think I was losing.
Yeah.
So it's kind of, I took responsibility for it. It's not like I was like, that should have been a win. I think you could have done it either way. I think you could score it either way, depending on what they're looking for, depending on, she threw a lot more strikes too, so it's like depending on what you look for, she's a good fighter.
Yeah, it's interesting, because, it kind of tells you what the judges are kind of looking for and all that as well. Personally, I would love...
totally turned it up.
Yeah.
Because I 100% would have at least, to caution to the air. If you told me I have 3 minutes or I lose, I'm not going to do well, I'm going to do my absolute best. I'm not going to do anything differently, but I would still like to know, in case, maybe you were well, maybe you're hurt or something, or maybe it's not worth it. I don't know. There could be so many different reasons you'd want to know.
Yeah, I personally, my big thing with the judges is the fact that, you get a blank score on there, and then you don't know why they scored it that way. Even maybe a sentence or two, to say why they decided that. There's even comments. If you ever see a scorecard, at the bottom there is a comment section there, and they hardly ever do anything with it. And I kind of hate that judges don't do that, because then you kind of get, what they want. This is kind of almost an art form more than it is anything else in terms of judging, because you do have your criteria, but sometimes they'll score for more strikes versus more power strikes and all that as well. So, I kind of would love to see it that way, just so that, if you have a judge that's coming up and you kind of see a precedent of what they're looking for, then you kind of know what's going on. But that's just me.
It should be across the board.
Yeah.
But if not, at least give me a chance to understand